Kitaj, and I'm your host for A Livelihood, New Adventures as We Age. And today I'm going to introduce you to David O'Neill, who has started a project called Story Trust. And we're going to learn about how he got involved in doing this. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Carmen. It's good to be with you.
Why don't you tell me, just briefly, what is Story Trust?
Story Trust is a company that produces memoir, books, oral histories, and documentary videos for families, family-owned businesses, and organizations that want to pass on a legacy to future generations.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
well, I found this just a wonderful and fascinating idea. As you might know, I'm a therapist and a life coach, so I'm always involved in listening to people's stories. And of course, for many people, they never get to tell their stories, right?
That's right. That's the foundation of the work that I do, is that giving people an opportunity to tell their story and document it somehow so that their family and loved ones know the stories, because we define ourselves by our stories. And so this gives multi-generational families a chance to understand their heritage and be able to pass on that legacy, that personal legacy to younger family members and ones they care for.
But I'm curious about, how did you get going with this? What prompted you to be interested in doing this?
Well, I started Story Trust about 5 years ago, and I had, for the longest time, I had been curious about my parents' lives before my siblings and I came along. I'm one of 6 children. I'm number 5 of 6. Mm-hmm. And so my parents weren't the kind of people who would tell stories or spin yarns or be very forthcoming about their lives. And so, I developed this curiosity about my parents, and I just, these stories would come out periodically, but I never, systematically sat down with any of them and kind of recorded or documented, their histories. For example, I don't know the names of my great-grandparents on my mother's side. I have no idea who they are. I mean, I could look through a genealogy and try to research that, and I've tried, but their names are so common that it's very difficult to find them. And so what I could have done is simply just ask my mother, says, tell me about your grandparents. When I was young, I just never thought to do that. I was absorbed in my own life, and I was trying to figure my own life out, and I really wasn't kind of curious about my parents' lives. And that's one of the challenges. I call it the legacy gap, is that by the time younger generations develop the curiosity to ask their parents these kinds of questions, or their grandparents, it's too late. That's right. Either their memories have deteriorated so much that they don't remember, or it's difficult to remember, or their health is poor, or they've passed away. When just prior to starting Story Trust, I had kind of got interested in my mother's story. My father had passed away quite a while ago. So this story, goes back to, in some ways, my childhood. We have a photograph here of my family in 1965, and so here I am with my siblings, and all but my youngest sister. She jokes that the only evidence that she's a part of our family is her birth certificate, because as the youngest, very few photographs are taken of her. They're all taken of the older ones. I thought that it would be great to record my mother's stories. And I'd been thinking about this for years. And so the following year, in 2006, I asked my mother if I could interview her. And that was in the summer of 2006. And in the fall of 2006, she fell and she broke her hip. And she never recovered. And she passed away in the hospital. Yeah. So I never got a chance to interview her, because there were just certain things that piqued my curiosity about her life. When she was a teenager, I have pictures of her in high school, when she went to Stonington High School in Stonington, Connecticut in 1946, 1947. I have a picture of her as a graduation picture, a beautiful strawberry blonde woman. And then I have this other picture of her sitting on the hood of this car, looking very sassy. And I'm like, that's not my mother. I don't know who this young girl is. And so I was really curious about what her life was like before she had a family. And so it's that kind of curiosity, I think, that actually doesn't get a chance to cross over from one generation to the next. But what I decided to do was to collect others' family stories. I couldn't get them from my parents directly, so I interviewed other relatives. And actually the first person I interviewed was my father-in-law. I didn't know him very well. I'd just been married for a year at that time. And I asked him, if I could, practice on him as I began to interview other people, and he agreed. And so that was the first book that I wrote, his book, which is called The Way It Was. And he has an interesting life story, growing up in Brooklyn and speaking Yiddish the first 5 years of his life. And so that's how I got started. People started asking me to record their stories, and I thought I'd do it as a hobby to begin with. And this was something that I was thinking about doing as, if I started doing this and did it as a hobby, maybe this would carry me into retirement. I was 45 at the time. I just turned 50 this past year. And so I thought, maybe in about 20 years, I will be able to this will be something that will be interesting and stimulating to me, and I will have laid the groundwork for being able to do it, as long as I can. So that was part of the motivation for me. It was my pre-retirement plan to think about doing personal histories, and the interest that people had in having me do it now made me change and decide to move from my career that I had in publishing to actually doing personal histories.
So we're going to talk about some of these wonderful books that you create, really, based on the interviews that you do with people in Story Trust. They look very professionally done. And
thank you.
You really are the creator of the whole thing.
That's right. That's right.
So what parts of it do you actually get involved in doing?
Well, I do everything from the interviews, which I'll talk a little bit about because that's an important part of the process. The interviews, the editing, and the book design and the layout. But at the core of it, I'm basically ghostwriting people's memoirs. So the first step is interviewing them and recording their stories. And in addition to putting them in print, I also create oral histories. So while I'm interviewing the storyteller, the narrator, I record those stories. And so I try to get really good quality recordings, so when the family listens to the recordings, they can actually, it feels like they're in the room. And then I edit that raw transcript into a narrative that that holds together and flows together as a complete story.
We do have an example of one of the interviews that you've done, just a little sample.
We do. It's a little 1-minute excerpt, and I have lots of these excerpts actually on my website at storytrust.com.
As a family, we used to go to the movies on Friday night, and then on Sunday, my brother, Whit, and I would sneak away and go to the double feature Sunday afternoon. So I went to at least 3 movies a week. And at that time, I began a record of them, which I have to this day and can show anyone who's interested, in which I recorded the movies. I gave them a review. I gave them a rating. I told everyone, the entire cast, who directed it, who produced it. This is a fairly invaluable record of the movies from the early to mid-30s down for 10 years. Incidentally, one of the more amusing ones, I write, "Newcomer Ronald Reagan shows promise."
I mean, he was a marvelous man. Actually, he passed away just this last January, before the book was complete. But the good thing is we did the recordings, and so the recordings became the source of the book.
So thank you so much, David, for being with us. We're going to have to wrap up.
Oh, thank you, Karma. It's been great to be with you.